Would you ask Mr. Hayes to come back in, please? Thank you. Right, Mr. Hayes, all ready to carry on?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Yes, Mr.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Mr. Hayes, can I ask you to go to your statement at page 19, please, and look at paragraph 58? You say in the beginning of that paragraph there, given that we thought we had narrowly failed the first test, and utilising the detail in the report, we started to draw conclusions about what caused the fire to spread to the top in the way that it did. And you identify that the cladding and the fire barriers as issues, but you then go on to say at the end of the paragraph, collectively we were content with the remaining components in the rig, including the use of RS5000, which did not change from the first test to the second test. Do you know who made the decision to carry out a second test?
Sorry, I don't mean to pause. I'm just trying to be accurate because I suspect that the information would have been given to me by John informally, but my understanding is that the decision to undertake a second test would have been made by Paul Evans and Craig Chambers.
Right. And if you just look up at the top of the page, at the end of paragraph 56, you say that in the last sentence there, the decision to undergo a second test was ultimately made by upper management and eventually filtered down to me via JR. Oh. By upper management, do you mean?
Paul and Craig would have ultimately made that decision, right. I believe.
And do you know whether Craig Chambers and Paul Evans were involved in a detailed discussion of the components of the failed test and an examination of what precise components had failed and how they could be improved for a second test?
No, I don't. There was not a discussion that I personally witnessed.
Right. Can we then turn to the design of the second test? I think you were involved in discussions about potential amendments to ensure, or to do your best to ensure, a pass of the second test, weren't you?
That's correct.
And that was with Mr. Roper, yes?
Yes.
And Mr. Evans, Paul Evans?
Yes.
And Rob Warren too?
That's correct.
And would you say that Paul Evans was closely involved in those discussions?
Yes, and I don't think it was a formal process or a meeting. I think there would have been lots of discussions. So I might have had a discussion with just Rob. I might have had a discussion with just John. There might have been a discussion when all four people were in a room.
Right.
But rather than being, we'll have a meeting and there'll be a date and an invitation, it was just people were in very close proximity to each other.
Right. But you've explained. I'm so sorry, I've cut you off. Do you want to continue? You've explained where physically Paul Evans and John Roper's offices were. You say one on top of the other. Where was your office in relation to theirs? Or
downstairs in the same building.
Right. So how often every day would you encounter them and discuss matters, business matters?
Most days I wouldn't see them, and that is because my day job was to answer the phones and answer emails, which was in a separate office on a separate floor.
Right.
So actually I wouldn't go upstairs because we had our own kitchen facilities and things like that. I wouldn't go upstairs and I wouldn't see them for the vast majority of days.
Right. I see. So you wouldn't bump into them on a daily basis?
No, not necessarily. Not that there was any segregation. It was just that, so you might see someone coming into the front of the building because there was a shared front door. But
okay. Now, one of the changes that was made as between the first test and the second test was the decision to increase the thickness of the Marley Eternit cladding panels from 8mm to 12mm, wasn't it?
That's correct.
Yes. Do you know who made that suggestion?
I don't know who made that suggestion. I think it would have come out from discussions amongst people and been generally agreed.
We know that John Roper was involved in that discussion because he told us. What about Paul Evans? Do you know that he was involved in that discussion?
Yes, he was.
And how do you know that?
Because I believe that I would have been present at discussions where it was being discussed, where he was in the room and an active part of that discussion.
Did Mr. Roper ever tell you that he had discussed that thickening of the exterior cladding panels for the test with Mr. Clark of the BRE, Phil Clark?
Yes, he did. It was discussed. And I think that John told me that Phil had suggested to him that a thickening of the cladding panels may well be enough to take the test from a failure to pass.
Now, you've said that in your understanding, Celetex's aim was to test a fairly representative system. Did you have any concerns after the first test and in designing the second test that in using a cladding panel of that increased thickness of 12 millimetres instead of 8, that might undermine that approach and consequently the likely marketability of RS 5000?
I thought at that stage that using a thicker cladding panel, it would still be an actual product which people use. So 12 millimetre Marley fibre cement would still be a panel which was advertised and offered to the market and used by people. So in that respect, it would still be representative. But I think I would have thought that it would narrow down the options of what people would be able to use, because I think the idea had always been that a field of applications report might be able to take something which had been tested and passed and then allow people to maybe change some components. So the awareness was that if you went from 8 millimetres to 12 millimetres, you're using something which is thicker, so that is going to limit what you can do with it because of... Sorry.
Yes, I see. Yes, I see. And if you go to paragraph 60 of your statement, please, on page 20, you can see there that you say, in the first line, it was decided that the Marley Eternit cladding was still a marketable choice of product and that increasing the thickness could be the most effective way to improve its performance. Did you have any concerns that if RS 5000 passed, it would still be marketable if only used with Marley Eternit panels of that thickness, in other words, 12 millimetres? Or you say that it was still possible, but limited, more limited than 8 millimetres?
It would limit it. I think if you have a market and you have lots of different cladding panels with lots of different fire ratings, the one that you have tested, I think the feeling is you're going to be limited to anything which is as good as that or better. So the higher up you go with what you've tested, everything below that line now is something which you're not going to be able to do.
Yes, I follow. Staying with paragraph 60, Mr. Hayes, you go on in the middle of that paragraph to say, given the level of urgency, I sensed from PE and JR the fact that authorisation was given so quickly for the second test and my knowledge of the new product budget from Saint-Gobain, I felt that there was significant pressure from upper management to pass the second test. This was heightened by the fact that the test was so expensive. We didn't want to be in a position where 12 millimetre cladding got us closer, but the test was still failed. When you refer to significant pressure from upper management to pass, what do you mean by that?
So after the first test, and as I explained before, things happened very quickly. So I think that the project had started in 2014, and I think the first test was in February. And so that's a reasonable amount of time for, I guess, research and thinking about what things are going to happen. So now discussions are happening very quickly. So there's discussions happening around, okay, what are we going to do with the second test? How is that going to pass? I know just from speaking to the tasks that John was given, so he had a lot of things to do. Some of those things I helped him with, for example, to contact the people who had built the rig to start with and get them to build a second rig. You'd have to order all of the materials for that, which is to say everything which goes into building that rig, from the steel frame to the sheathing board to the installation, of course, is ours, to the cladding panels. He's got to arrange with the BRE for another test rig. In fact, I think that the BRE didn't have a rig available for us to test as quickly as they wanted to retest. And I think they had 3 rigs available, and 2 of them were steel frame rigs, and 1 of them was a masonry rig. And the masonry rig, I think, is concrete blocks inside a frame. And I actually think that because John had been told he had to do it as quickly as possible, they actually paid the BRE an extra £5,000 to knock out the blocks so that a steel frame could be installed.
Oh, right.
So I think I'm correct in remembering this, that they actually paid more money to fast track it. That's a kind of way to say it.
Right. Do you know, just following that up a bit, whether that extra £5,000 was in the original budget for the second test, or whether Joe Mahoney had to be reapproached to expand the budget to include that extra payment?
I'm afraid I don't know
You
that.
don't know. Can I ask you, you say upper management. You refer to upper management being behind the pressure. Can you just tell us who that was? Is that, again, Craig Chambers and Paul Evans?
Yes, so I know from John, of course, that he's being given these instructions by Paul, and these instructions are, okay, you need to do this, you need to do that. It needs to be as quickly as possible. In terms of, there's a degree of assumption when I'm saying that pressure is coming down from Craig to Paul to John, and that, I guess that assumption and that impression is formed from some of the things that I said earlier. So discussions about an imminent budget in being given to Saint-Gobain, and people from Celetex having to travel to Paris to deliver that budget.
Right.
And that budget, a key part of that budget was that it had to be from new products, that only RS 5000 would satisfy that requirement. I knew that Craig followed the project very closely. So as an example, the meeting that we had, which was the update meeting that we discussed earlier, Craig was an active part of that discussion. It wasn't a case of Craig sort of sitting back there and saying, okay, you bring me up to speed and okay, crack on. My impression of that meeting was that he understood the technical nuances around the testing very well, and that he was very keen in that meeting for that project to go forward and as quickly as possible.
Was that the 4th of November 2013
Yes,
meeting?
That's correct.
Was there any meetings between November 2013 and May 2014 that you were at with
No.
him? Right.
But
or that you were aware of where he had attended, which had discussed the project?
No, I wouldn't necessarily expect it to have been invited to those.
Now, did you think at the time that there would be any consequences for you personally if the second test failed?
No, I didn't.
No. Can we look at paragraph 61? Same page. You say, I therefore went to JR, RW and PE with a suggestion that we also include an additional board of material behind the cladding just at the point of the fire barriers. This, in conjunction with the thicker cladding, would increase the time it took for any fire to progress through the cladding and consequently climb the rig. The board I suggested was a 6mm magnesium oxide board placed behind the cladding, and you define that as the additional material. This would be used in conjunction with the now 12mm thick layer of the cladding. JR and PE agreed to adopt this approach in principle, with PE having the final sign-off. However, they also decided to amend the thickness of the cladding at the point where the additional material was placed from 12mm to 8mm thick to try and ensure continuity of the cladding surface across the rig. Now, just breaking that down a little bit, it looks from that, and I've read it to you all, that you were the person who suggested the 6mm magnesium oxide board, yes?
That's correct.
And they were the ones who, JR and PE, were the ones who came up with the amendment of the thickness of the 12mm cladding to bring it down to 8 to try to ensure continuity of the cladding surface throughout.
Yes.
Yes. Now, just looking at that a little bit more closely still, are you saying that you made this suggestion of the 6mm magnesium oxide as a result of the pressure that you observed or felt to do the best that you could to stop the second test failing?
Yes.
So you were the one who came up with the 6mm magnesium oxide. How did you come up with that idea?
I think it had been when we had the discussions at SOTEC, John Eggington had given the idea that perhaps the test could pass with an improved fire barrier. And so that was the seed of that fire barriers are an important part of what might make the test pass or fail. So that's where the idea that fire barriers are an important part of that system is.
And just to be clear, is that the note, your note of the 3rd of October 2013 meeting, CEL 3011052, fourth bullet point down, what you saw earlier?
About the
reference.
double fire barriers.
Yes, I see.
So I think that suggestion, which had initially been put forward by John before the first test, I was now revisiting in my mind, and I think part of that was to look at the fire barriers that Kingspan had used on their successful test, because I think they described it as being a stainless steel aluminium grill product, which, although I don't think they named it, so I think in some way we found out what that had been called, and it became apparent that that was no longer available. So it seemed that John's idea of using a double system was not going to work, because actually one of the things of the two was actually no longer available. And I don't think that there was any similar products available. And as I understand it now, I actually don't think such products, which is to say a stainless steel cavity barrier, are actually very common at all. And so then I guess the mind turns to fire barriers are important. How else could the performance of the fire barrier be improved? And I think the feeling was after the first test that once the cladding panels had cracked, fire moves into the cavity, which is between the insulation and the cladding panel, and then travels up within that cavity. And it's the job of the fire barriers to stop that happening. So the fire will go up in that cavity, but once it hits the fire barrier will stop it, and so it won't go any further. And I think we thought that the fire barrier is not very effective once the cladding has gone, because the cavity is between two things, something at the front and something at the back. And then the cavity fire barrier blocks that gap. And so if you have the thing at the front, you have the thing at the back, and you have the fire barrier, then the fire is stopped on its journey. So if any of those three things are no longer there, for example, if the cladding panel has cracked and fallen away, you'll still have the fire barrier, but would fire actually go around the barrier and continue? And so the barrier would be ineffective, not because the barrier itself has failed, but because I guess that part of the construction has failed. So the feeling was, if the cladding panel is still there, then the fire barrier will do its job, and that will contribute to a passing of the test. So the idea of reinforcing the cladding at the point of the fire barrier means that the fire barrier will now be able to do its job, retard fire from moving up. And of course, that is the pass and fail criteria of the test. And so therefore, hopefully, that will contribute to successfully passing the test.
Two questions from that. Was it you first who came up with the idea of reinforcing, your word, the cladding at the rear face of it, where the fire barrier would meet it?
I remember it being my idea, yes.
And secondly, was it you who came up with the idea of magnesium oxide as the material which you would place there as the reinforcement?
I believe so, but I don't think that was a conscious choice of saying, okay, what would be the best material to do this? I think magnesium oxide would be a good choice. I think it was because magnesium oxide was being used already as the sheathing board. Yeah. And so it was logical, okay, we can just use more of the same.
I see. So can we cut a long story short in this sense, that
Sorry.
You came up... No, I'm not being critical at all of your answer. It's helpful to hear exactly what the thinking was. Does it come to this, that you thought the best way of getting this to pass the test was to keep the cavity in place, as opposed to having the panels crack. And therefore, the best way of doing that would be to reinforce them with a non-combustible substrate, the same as we were already using as the sheathing board, namely
that's correct.
magnesium oxide. Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you. Now, you say in paragraph 61 that you went to JR, RW, and PE with that suggestion. Do you remember when you went to them with that suggestion?
I don't remember exactly when that was. It was at a time after the first test, and while thoughts were being turned to how the second test, the composition of the second test would be put together. I don't believe it was, as I said before, a kind of a formal meeting or gathering when people are there. And I think it was a combination of informal discussions. So I can remember, for example, I think I'll say this later, having just an informal discussion with Rob Warren about it, just the two of us, and that was downstairs in the technical centre offices. And I think I can remember having a chat with John Roper about it when it was just the two of us. And I think I can remember a conversation where everybody was in the room.
Right. I want to focus on Paul Evans, because I think you'll perhaps know in general terms from his evidence that he, I think I can safely say, denies being told about the 6mm magnesium oxide. Perhaps that's a mischaracterization of his evidence, but I want to get your evidence. How clear in your mind do you recollect telling Paul Evans that you should use, or they should use, a 6mm magnesium oxide board behind the cladding?
I can remember a specific conversation, although not in a huge amount of detail, and it was, I believe, upstairs where Paul and John's office was, and Paul was there, and John was there, and I was there, and it was a conversation around this idea. And from that specific recollection, but from also my general impressions as well, and many other things that I witnessed, there's no doubt at all in my mind that Paul Evans knew about the missing material. And I would go further, and I think I say this in my statement, that Paul would have to ultimately make the decision that it was what was going to be the composition of the second test rig.
Yes. You say there's no doubt in your mind at all about that?
None whatsoever.
Thank you. He, and again, I don't want to misrepresent his evidence, but he denies that. How can you account for that?
The short answer is I can't, and that I can only speak for my own testimony. And anything that I say would be I'm not sure what the word is, a kind of supposition on my part.
I was going to interrupt and thought I'd better let the answer run on, but I
think
don't
the
think
answer
it's
is-
for
I
this
think we
witness
can-
to say what
Very well.
whether he can explain Mr. Evans's evidence, is it?
Very well. I think the answer was a perfectly elucidating answer. Now, given that Celetex had used magnesium oxide as the sheathing board for the February test, you knew it was non-combustible. Perhaps that was the idea. Yes?
Yes.
Had you had any conversations with Mr. Clark of the BRE about using magnesium oxide as a reinforcement panel behind the thickened rain screen or cladding panel?
No.
Did you have any conversations with the BRE about that? Anybody else at the BRE about that?
No.
You were, I think, aware, and you say this in your statement at paragraph 72, that this was not representative. That is, the addition of a reinforcing magnesium oxide board behind the cladding panel was not representative of what would commonly be used in the market.
Yes.
Yes. And given that it wasn't representative of what would commonly be used in the market, why did you suggest it?
I think, in my mind, it was for a couple of reasons. One would be there was still on the table this idea of a field of applications report. So it could be that whilst it was not representative, if the test passed really, really well, there might still be the opportunity for a field of applications report to allow people to later on, change that component. And the other thing is, I don't think it had, well, there may have been discussions which I was not party to, but in my mind, I thought there was still the potential for Celetex to offer that as a complete system to the market, albeit with a hugely reduced scope of perhaps people who might be interested in that. But there may still be people who would want to do that based upon the fact that PIR was still going to be a lot thinner than rock wool and or mineral wool, and that would solve some problems. And possibly if the market became more educated to the rules, which is to say things should be a proper system as opposed to how Kingspan was doing it, then there still might be people who would find that attractive. And there was also a feeling, I think, and I thought at the time it was a feeling shared by others, but perhaps it wasn't, that let's just get over the line. Let's get a pass and let's see what happens later.
So just on that last part of your answer, was the main reason to suggest the magnesium oxide there in order to maximise the chances of a pass?
Yes, it was.
Right. But you were also aware that any BRE classification, BRE 135 classification, would only apply to the tested system and nothing else?
I was aware of that, yes.
So if the intention was to be transparent about the tested system, an unrepresentative test wasn't going to be of much use. Did you understand that?
I knew that it would be of less use.
Right. Can we go to paragraph 72 of your statement, please? And you say there at the bottom of page 23, from conversations between JR and PE to which I was privy, I was aware that there were concerns that a rig with the additional material present would not be representative of what the market would want to use in their buildings. I was the most junior person in the room at any of those conversations. It was not usual to include extra material at specified points throughout a building, and it was a matter of common sense that it would be burdensome and more expensive to incorporate into any such construction. Based upon their concerns regarding the marketability of the product, and I assume the opinion they must have formed about the likelihood that the rig would have passed the second test without the additional material, based on the view expressed by PC, a decision was made and conveyed to me that it would not be referred to within the BRE's final report or included in Celetex marketing of the rig. I was not involved in making of this decision, and I cannot recall who specifically told me, but it is most likely to have been JR or PE. Was the intention always to conceal the use of what you've defined as the additional material?
No, well, for me, definitely not. And I don't believe, or I didn't believe, that that was in the mind of other people prior to the passing of the second test. Although, and that really is my testimony, but looking at other evidence I've seen, it may have been in the mind of others. But for me, there was no doubt in my mind that up until after the second test, the intention had always been that we would work with what we had got.
Now, you say at the top of page 24, within paragraph 72, a decision was made. To the best of your recollection, Mr. Hayes, who made that decision?
I've given this a lot of thought because when I put together this first statement, I couldn't remember and don't remember who specifically told me that, what the conversation was, who was present, and when it was. And I knew and was told that this would likely to be an extremely critical point. And so I've tried hard to remember that, but I simply cannot remember exactly what the occasion was when I was told or who told me. And so I've written that it is most likely to have been Jonathan Roper or Paul Evans.
Yes, as you say in the last sentence. You can't improve on that sitting here today.
I can't, and I wish I could.
That's very fair. Thank you. Did that decision, when conveyed to you, come as a surprise?
Yes, it did.
Did you have any concerns at the time that that decision was made and conveyed to you, that concealing the presence and identity of the additional materials as you defined them was a dishonest way of presenting the test?
Yes, I believed and believe and know it to be wholly wrong and dishonest.
Do you mind if I just interrupt and clarify one thing? Mr. Hayes, if we look at the top line of the document on the screen, you're saying that a decision was made within Celetex by the people you suggest, that it would not be referred to within the BRE's final report. Now that suggests that the decision was made in relation to the form of the BRE report. Is that what you mean to say?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Well, now that suggests that someone in Celetex either had spoken to the BRE or intended to speak to the BRE to make sure it wasn't mentioned. Is that what you recall?
I'm just taking a moment to try to be accurate. I don't think that's what I'm saying, and the reason I'm taking some time is because I have seen many other pieces of evidence. I'm trying hard to think what I would have known at the time, but I know a couple of things. One of the things is that the official BRE position is that actually the report is based upon information that you provide to them, which is to say they would expect you, I believe, to say this was the rig that these were the components that were used. And also, I think, and this is where I'm trying, because I've seen evidence about this, is that they sent through a draft report which did not mention that material. So it could be that there was a degree of opportunism in there, where instead of actually saying to the BRE, don't include this, that perhaps they're going to take the opportunity to not correct a mistake that the BRE has made, albeit I believe that there was an individual person at the BRE who was aware of the presence of the magnesium oxide board on that rig, and I've no doubt that we will come to that shortly.
Yes, all right, thank you. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, we will come, I think, to examine that evidence a little bit.
Well, I'm sure we shall, but it was this
Later on,
particular formulation of his recollection
Yeah, absolutely.
seemed to me to suggest that it was worth exploring.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it is, and we'll come to some documents a little bit later on that exact point. But thank you for that. That's very helpful. Can I just ask you to look, please, at paragraph 62 of your statement, page 20, please. You say there, and we've been through this already, that in the third line, JR and PE agreed to adopt this approach in principle, with PE having the final sign-off. Were you aware of whether the decision had to be signed off by anybody senior to Mr. Evans, or was Mr. Evans, as you say, having the final sign-off?
No, I'm not aware that that would be the case. I think that in that respect, I think Paul would be able to make that decision.
Right. Do you know whether, when making that decision, that sign-off, Mr. Evans went to Mr. Chambers or sought anybody more senior, sought the approval of anyone more senior in adopting the approach you've described?
No, I don't know. My knowledge at the time would have been that I wouldn't have known that. I think Craig Chambers was the only person who was senior to Paul who reported directly to him, and there were no other layers of management between Paul and Craig.
Right. Have you any reason to believe, to the best of your recollection, that Mr. Chambers was involved in that decision?
No.
Can we go to CEL 403089, please? And this is really a timing point. This is an email halfway down page 1. There's an email from you to Rob Warren on the 26th of February about a meeting with the cavity fire barrier manufacturer, also now on the rotor. Now, this is just shortly after the first failed test, about 2 weeks later. At that stage, meeting the cavity fire barrier manufacturer, was that Siderise?
It was, yes.
Was there discussion at that stage of the use of the 6mm magnesium oxide in conjunction with the fire barriers, or did that come later?
No, there was no discussion with Siderise about that at all.
Right. Now, we then turn to the May 14 test itself. Can we look at CEL 408508? And if we turn to page 2 in that document, this appears to be a copy of a design. If we go to page 2 of that, page 1 is the design of the rig for the second test, isn't it? At least in terms of the location of the thermocouples.
Yes, it is.
And then page 2 is a copy of your notes of the materials for the second test. And I think you say that you used this to assist Mr. Roper in ordering the materials. Is that right?
Yes, I think the primary purpose of this is to work out how much of every different component you might need.
Right. And halfway down that page, we see, under rails, magnesium oxide 6mm, 6 times 2.88 square metres. So you decided by that stage, or at the time you wrote this document, that that's what you needed. Are you able to tell us when you think you generated this document? Wrote it?
I'm not, but I believe that it is I guess towards the end of the period of time between the first and second test.
Right.
Because this is not a document where we're thinking about what we're going to do. This is a document, I guess, we know what's happening. Actually, what John's got to do is go and get all this stuff together and get it delivered down to the BRE.
Right.
And I think what I'm helping with there are how much of different things you might need.
I see. And so we see the magnesium oxide 6mm, we see the Marley Eternit 12mm and the measurement for that, and then we see Eternit 8mm, 6 times 3.6 square metres.
Yes.
And that's a reference to the thinner cladding material. Do you know where you bought the magnesium oxide 6mm from, as opposed to the magnesium oxide 12mm, which was the sheathing board, which we can see referred to at the top of this page?
No, I actually don't know where that was ordered from.
No, the reason I ask is because we haven't seen a delivery note for that material. Do you think you acquired it from the same source as the 12mm sheathing board, or a different source?
I have to say I wasn't involved in that aspect of it. Equally, I've never seen or been shown that document. I think it would be odd to have gone somewhere else. The only reason that you would go somewhere else is if whoever you were buying the 12mm from said, oh yeah, you can get 6mm, but we don't particularly do it. You'll have to go somewhere else.
Were you involved in that?
No, not.
You weren't. All
No,
right. So far as you can tell us, do you know how long in advance before the test it was delivered to the BRE?
I don't remember when any of these, or would have known when any of these things were delivered to the BRE, but I think that because the entire time frame between the first and second test was so quick, I'm guessing that a lot of this stuff is likely to have been done sort of just in time, if that makes sense.
Yes. Well, we can get a sense of that from the delivery notes of the other materials, which are tend to be in April. But from your knowledge, do you know who would have signed for this material at the BRE?
No, I don't. I think the BRE burn hall was on their overall site. So I remember that having to get onto the overall site, you actually went through a checkpoint with a guard and a barrier. So I would think that they would have a proper goods in delivery system where somebody would have to go to the barrier and they'd say, I've got this invoice and it's got to go there. And they would say, okay, you go to there. And I think I remember actually that Phil, who I believe practically ran the burn hall, it was very common for them to receive materials from everybody because they were doing lots of testing with lots of different people. So they were having materials being delivered for tests all the time. And so I think that they would have had a proper procedure for goods in, if you like, where they would have a person who would sign things, check things in. And of course they were dealing with manufacturers' property. And so they would have to make sure that things were put into a secure area and wouldn't be lost or misplaced or damaged.
So far as you know, was Phil Clark aware that 6 millimetres of magnesium oxide was to be used in this test in the way you've described?
Yes.
How do you know that?
Because of the conversation that I heard between John and Phil Clark, but also in a more general sense, the burn hall was a facility which had 3 test rigs and then a couple of offices attached to it, and I think that Phil ran it and was based there, so his main office was in the same building, and I think that they did lots of tests of different types, and I think that he would have been constantly, because of the layout of it, I think he would have been constantly walking past that rig and looking at it every single day from its initial day one of construction to its last day of dismantling.
Do you know how long it took to construct?
I don't. I would, but from the first test, I believe there was a few days worth of labour.
Right, okay. And how long was it up for after the test, do you know?
I don't know, but I believe that they were quite keen to get things down because it might be that somebody else wanted to use that rig for their own test.
You didn't attend the second test, but you did attend the rig afterwards.
I did, yes.
And what was the point of looking at the rig after the test?
Because I was interested in it and because, frankly, it was just a day out from my normal job, which was pretty much a call centre type role.
Right.
And so it was, let's have a day out, let's do something different, drive up there with John, probably have some lunch, have a day out from doing my normal duties.
How many times did you visit the test rig after the test?
So I think I put in my statement that I was there on at least one occasion.
Yes.
It would not be impossible that it was 2, and so to be fair to myself, I've said it might have been more than one occasion.
Yes,
but
you did. Can we look at paragraph 67 of your statement, page 22, please? I'm going to read it all to you. You say, at a visit to the rig after the second test, I recall a conversation between PC, that's Phil Clark at the BRE, and JR, John Roper, where, when asked by JR, PC agreed that the rig had passed the second test so easily that he suspected that it would have passed even without the additional material, just using the cladding. My recollection of the conversation is that it was led by JR, and PC's opinion in this regard was expressed in agreement with JR. We were on the second floor in an office looking down at the second test rig. We all got on well with PC, and he was telling us about what it was like to work at the BRE, including that they had dealt with the burning of the cows when the mad cow outbreak occurred. Now, it looks from that as if you're saying, can you just confirm for us, Mr. Hayes, that Phil Clark knew about the 6 millimetres magnesium oxide sitting behind the 8 millimetres of Marley Eternit.
Yes, that is correct.
Are you in any doubt about that?
No doubt at all.
And indeed, as we can see from the photographs from the test, it was obvious that there were two kinds of cladding panel being used because there are two different colours.
Yes.
One is white, and that's the 12 millimetre Marley Eternit, and one is orange, and that's the 8 millimetre Eternit, isn't it?
That's correct.
And I think you make the same point at paragraph 80 of your witness statement. Just visit that, please. Page 26. You say there, although at the time I did not turn my mind to whether the BRE as a body had an awareness that the additional material was omitted from the report, and I do not now believe that it did, I knew that PC, an individual representative of the BRE, had such awareness and was content in himself that the additional material would not have made a difference to the second test result. I took comfort from this, and it supported my decision not to challenge the omission of the additional material going forward. Is the basis of your belief, as you stated there, that Phil Clark knew about the additional material, that at the very least, because he had acknowledged the fact during your mad cow conversation, if I can call it that? Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Yes. Now, Phil Clark was the senior consultant at the BRE and had signed the report. He'd signed both the draft and the final version of the full test report. That's right, isn't it?
Yes.
Why do you seek to draw the distinction that you do here at paragraph 80 between Phil Clark as an individual and the BRE as a corporate entity?
I think that probably at the time of doing my first statement, I think it felt fairly obvious that this was a very important and serious matter, and that it is likely a question would be, do you think the BRE as a body knew? And I think I've probably tried to address it in advance.
Right. Why do you say you don't think that BRE as a body was aware, even though Phil Clark was? What's the basis for the distinction that you're making?
Well, one, I don't think it is very likely that actually the BRE as a body would undertake those actions. And secondly, I guess because of the chain of events later, in terms of the provision of the draft test report and the email asking Phil to remove a photograph which showed the missing material.
Right. I don't wish to be rude, Mr. Hayes, but that sounds a bit like speculation.
Okay.
Is that fair, that in fact the basis on which you're drawing that distinction is speculative?
So perhaps a better way to do it is that I knew that Phil knew. So perhaps I'm speculating now, and perhaps that is speculation in my statement, although it's my belief, but that belief is based upon just an assumption of mine rather than a specific knowledge, I suppose.
Are you suggesting, from what you know, that Phil Clark kept the additional material secret from Stephen Howard, who I think was his boss at the BRE?
I've never actually considered that point, but I think that he would have had to have done that because, and I'm not sure I would have known this at the time, but I understand now that there is a process within the BRE where the report is peer reviewed, and those people have to or should look at the notes that Phil and his team put together and the photographs and plans and other things. And so there must have been a failure in communication, to put it one way, between the time where Phil does his report and the time when the BRE or another person at the BRE peer reviews and authorises that report.
Is your evidence that you knew, or rather he knew, that you, Celetex, were intending to conceal the presence of the additional material, and that he went along with that, but didn't share that with either Stephen Howard or the review team, peer review team?
I think to draw a clear distinction between what I know and what I'm assuming, what I know is that Phil Clark knew about the missing material, or the 6mm magnesium oxide. I cannot say to you that I know or have any factual basis to make the claim that he did or didn't discuss that or conceal it from other people at the BRE.
If Phil Clark knew about the presence of the additional material, are you able to explain why none of the drafts and the final version of the full test report makes any reference to the 6mm magnesium oxide or the 8mm of marlioternate?
No, I'm not.
Are you saying that your view at the time, understanding at the time, was that even though Phil Clark had that knowledge, what was your understanding at the time of the fact that even though, as you say, Phil Clark had that knowledge, there was nonetheless no reference to those materials in the test reports?
So obviously there is a draft test report. So Phil has put together that draft test report, but I think at that period of time, there are no drawings of the second test. So he's relying on drawings from the first test, which don't show that material.
He would have known that they were inaccurate, though, wouldn't he?
Yes.
Come the second test.
But then, why would do a draft report at all then before you have all the information that you're supposed to have in order to produce it? So the answer is I don't know why the first test report came through without that missing material.
Did you ever discuss it with him?
No, I never discussed it with Phil.
Did you think at the time that Phil Clark had deliberately omitted reference to the additional material, or had just accidentally overlooked it, even though he knew about it?
Well, Mr. Millett, I wonder whether that's something we ought to ask this.
Well, I think it is, because
if he's got some grounds for drawing a conclusion one way or the other, he can tell us what they are.
yeah. Well, it's the same point as you put, I think, to the witness. Can I just try it a slightly different way then? Maybe we'll come to it in a moment. But when you saw the reports come back without the reference to it, given the fact that you knew Mr. Clark knew about the presence of the additional material, what was your understanding about the reasons why it wasn't referred to?
I don't know, and I don't know whether it was that he had just put together the draft report, and that report would be on the basis that it was a draft and it would be brought up to date by Celetex providing updated information, and that it was never intended to be more than exactly that, a draft, and it didn't matter that it was not accurate. That seems to me to be the most likely explanation.
Now, just continuing a little bit more with this theme, you say and the chairman has picked this up with you before, that the decision was made by Celetex that the presence of the magnesium oxide would not be referred to in the report. Given, as we've established, that it wasn't identified in the draft, did that mean a decision not to correct the draft so as to provide a complete description of the system? Or does it mean that there was a prior agreement or decision that the draft shouldn't contain reference to the magnesium oxide?
Well, the short answer is I don't know. I am aware of looking at evidence and hearing other people's evidence, of a kind of timeline, if you like, which is that, and so I'm referring to things here which I don't really have contemporary knowledge of, but we know that
Yes.
I guess we know there was a board meeting where the material was discussed. There was another meeting, I think, between Paul and John and Paul Reed, and that seemed to be the morning that the first draft of that test has arrived. So they obviously are in possession of a test report at this point in time. It doesn't have the missing material in it. And so the question is then a decision taken which is opportunistic? Okay, here we have a test report, the missing material's not in it. We could go on from here. Or actually, was it something that was a decision to be made earlier than that, and actually, no matter what happened, they were going to not reference that material?
I see. Do you recall any discussions yourself with Phil Clark or anybody else from the BRE about the emission of the 6 millimetres magnesium oxide or the 8 millimetres of Eternit?
No. So the only evidence that I have in terms of Phil's knowledge is that conversation which I witnessed, although I think that there is strong documentary evidence to show that he knew, which is to say the photograph which was asked to be removed from the test report.
Right, I'm going to come to that now. Can we look, please, at CEL 401350? This is the email of the 1st of July 2014, which attached the first draft of the test report, which had been dated the 2nd of June 2014, which goes back with notes on it from John Roper to Phil Clark. And we can see the beginning of the email at the foot of page 1. And if we go to page 2, we can see you were copied into this email, as was Paul Evans. And if we go to page 2, you can see in the second paragraph, as previously discussed, could you also replace figure 18 with the attached photographs, as we want to show a close-up of the condition of our insulation below and above fire break with the intumescent fired off. If you feel you also have a suitable photograph, please include. Now, when you saw this email, did you understand that John Roper was asking the BRE to remove what, on the face of the report, was the only element of the report which showed the presence of the magnesium oxide layer?
Yes, I did.
You did. Did you know anything of the background to that request?
I believe in my statement I may have referenced a conversation which I witnessed regarding that photograph. I believe, my memory isn't brilliant, but I have a memory of being upstairs in possibly John's office, and Paul Evans was there. They were discussing the photograph and the reasons for the removal of that photograph. And I think it was because it clearly showed the missing material, which they didn't want to appear in the report, and that the purpose of asking Phil to remove that photograph was for no other reason than to remove a photograph which was, I think, a dead giveaway, if you like, that missing material was on the test rig.
Did you yourself have a discussion about the request to remove that photograph from this test report, or draft test report, with John Roper?
No, I think that was the only discussion that I was part of or witnessed was that one discussion which I've just outlined. I don't think I had a separate discussion with John about it.
What about Paul Evans? Did you have a discussion with Paul Evans about the removal of this photograph from the report?
No.
You didn't. Nonetheless, you could see from the email that he was copied in to the email and to the request. What was your understanding at the time about how much he was involved in or knew about that request?
I think he absolutely knew exactly what that was, and I would imagine that it would have been, well, I don't know, I don't want to again say things that I don't know, but my understanding and everything of how Paul had been the ultimate decision maker up until then, that would lead me to believe that he would have asked John to do that. And again, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind, based upon that conversation, which I witnessed, that Paul was completely aware of the reason for that photograph being asked to be removed. And I think it's most likely that actually he had asked John to do that.
Was it your view at the time, or understanding at the time, that Celetex was engaged in a deliberate attempt to create a misleading test report?
Yes, that's exactly what was happening.
Were you concerned about that?
I was very concerned about that.
Why didn't you challenge it?
It's not an easy question to answer. My understanding was, and now, is that a decision had been made by the senior management of Celetex. I didn't know who I should speak to or who I could speak to. I lacked I guess the life experience to find the right way forward. And it was a failure of courage, and a failure of character, and a failure of moral fibre on my part not to do so.
Mr. Hayes, thank you for that answer. Now, just turning back to Phil Clark again, I just want to see if I can understand what was going on to the best of your recollection. And obviously, I'm not asking you to peer into his mind. I want your understanding. But if, as you say, Phil Clark knew about the presence of magnesium oxide in the test, and also knew that there was no reference to it in the list of components of the test as described in the report, do you know, why did you think, rather, he put figure 18 in at all, if it would have, as it did, revealed the presence of magnesium oxide?
I don't know. I think that it's a very obvious photograph, because that photograph shows all of the outer cladding removed, and the only thing that is left in that photograph, the 6mm magnesium oxide at the top, but also very importantly, it shows a section of magnesium oxide board which has been left at level 2. So that photograph, if you wanted a photograph which was a clear illustration of the presence of that material, you could not have chosen a clearer photograph. And I wonder why he's done that. I wonder if he has actually done that deliberately, to say, look, here you go, this is the missing material.
Now, we know about the request to remove it. We also know that it was left in when the final report came through at the end of July. Are you able to enlighten us as to why the BRE or Phil Clark personally left the photograph in as what became figure 19?
Whatever answer I give would be a guess because I actually don't know.
Right. Well, that's the answer.
Okay.
Now, and I'm going to try to cut a long story short with this, but do you know from your knowledge that the drawings for the rig, for the purposes of the final report, were not updated to show the presence of the 6 millimetres magnesium oxide or the 8 millimetres Mali Eternit Natura?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Do you know why that was?
I believe that at that time a decision had been made that that missing material was not to be referenced within the test report, and I would say that it is a deliberate action to say to the BRE, here are the plans that you need to use in your report, and that the reason that the drawings do not show that material is because they are being deliberately left off to aid in that process.
And who was involved in that particular decision, the decision about the drawings?
I think it would have stemmed from the decision for that material not to be shown, because once that decision has been made, it logically follows that you have certain tasks to do which will follow on from that decision. And really, I think that everything that happened after that, whether it's the photograph, whether it is the drawings, whether it is, and I'm sure we'll come to this, the production of later marketing materials and literature, I think everything stems from that decision. And so it would be, if you've made that decision, it's going to be one necessary task will be to get the drawings updated and to make sure that material is not shown.
Now, on the screen in front of us, we've still got the email chain of the 1st of July 2014. Can I ask you to go back to that email string and look at the top, please, of page 1? This is another email from John Roper on that same day, 1st of July 2014, to Paul Evans and copy to you, subject forward test report comments. And it says, Paul will discuss in more depth later on when we do the official handover, but I've spoken to Luke at Simco this morning and he expects to have the updated drawings of the rig complete by tomorrow, if not end of the week. I've asked him to send these through to you in my absence. Can you please run these by Jamie to check all the details and send through to Phil at the BRE the relevant drawings to replace figures 4, 5 and 6 of the test report. Phil will then implement these into the report with the other amends and put forward to Steve Howard, his boss, to complete and sign off. And then in the last paragraph, he says, Jamie is aware of what needs amending on the drawings, so he will be able to identify that the correct changes have been made. And do you accept that you were involved in the changes or lack of changes to the drawings?
Yes, I do.
Did you have a conversation with Mr. Evans, as indicated by John Roper here, about the relevant drawings that should be sent to Phil at the BRE?
I'm not sure that I did. I don't remember, I'm afraid.
Did you have input into the actual changes in the drawings? Did you have a discussion with Simco about what changes should be made?
No, I never had any direct contact with them ever at all, I don't believe.
Right. Did you identify that the correct changes had been made, as John Roper indicates you would do in the last paragraph of that email?
So there are changes that need to be made to the drawings, and they're changes which would need to be made anyway, because moving aside the missing material, there were actually legitimate changes between the first rig and the second rig, and the primary one being the change of thickness from 10 millimetres to from 8 millimetres to 12 millimetres for the main cladding.
Yes.
And I think there were also some errors on the first drawing, which had always stood. And I think one of those errors was the thickness of the plasterboards, for example, on the steel framing system.
Yes. Thank you. And as you told us before, the drawings that you, as far as you know, went to the BRE were incomplete because they omitted any reference to the 6 millimetres magnesium oxide or the 8 millimetres Eternit.
That is correct.
And that was deliberate.
Yes.
Yes. I'm going to turn to product literature. Mr. Chairman, this may be a convenient moment for a break.
Yes, it probably is, isn't it? Well, we'll have a short break now, Mr. Hayes. We'll come back at 25 to 4, please. And while you're out of the room, no talking to anyone about your evidence or anything related to it, please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. 25 to 4, please. Yes, would you ask Mr. Hayes to come back in, please? Thank you. Right, Mr. Hayes, all ready to carry on?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Bennett.
Mr. Hayes, can I just revisit two things in your evidence? First, when the decision was first made to add the additional materials to the second test rig, was that when a decision was made also to conceal it as best you could from the public? Or was that decision made later?
No, I think that we touched upon this earlier, and in my mind, there was no doubt at all that until after the second test, certainly for me, and I can't speak for others, that there was only good intentions to do things correctly. I'm not aware of any feeling to conceal that material until after the second test.
And doing the best you can, do you know when or how long after the second test that decision was made?
No, I don't.
Mr. Hayes, I feel I ought just to press you a little further on that, because there are others who may have other views about this. It might be said that the rig as proposed for the second test was so far from being a representative rig of what might be produced in practice as to be useless unless one did suppress the existence of the magnesium oxide boards. What would you say about that?
I think it's similar to a question that I have answered, and I think that I expressed that, first of all, there was a kind of, I believe, let's worry about it later attitude, which is to say, okay, well, let's get a test on and we'll see what we can do with that. That there were still thoughts that a field of applications report route might be available, even though the test itself would not be representative, that people may be able to use that test data and extrapolate from it in a field of applications, especially if the result was very good, I guess, so to speak.
I have to say, at the moment, I'm finding it difficult to see how anyone could have thought that data derived from a rig that was so far removed from anything that was likely to be built in practice could be the subject of any useful field of application report.
I think you're absolutely correct, and as I sit here today, I don't believe that it could be.
And well, that raises the question, you see, whether you really did believe what you're telling us.
Because I think that there was not a great level of understanding, certainly from myself, as to exactly what a field of applications report would look like, how far it would be able to go. So we had the meeting at IFC where Peter had expressed the view that, yes, you could get a field of applications report. There might be a wide variety of scope that could be the case, and it would depend upon the performance of the test in that, as it had performed on the day. It may also have, no, and that's my answer.
Right, all right, thank you. Now, Mr. Willett, you had another question.
Yes,
Jumped in ahead of you.
Well, I know, I want to follow up on that, if I may, Mr. Chairman. You say that the decision to conceal it came later, and that the decision beforehand was just to go ahead and get the test done, and maybe you could get a field of application report for it. What was it about the results of the test that meant that you could no longer be candid and open and honest about the presence of the additional materials, which then caused the decision to conceal it to be made?
Well, I think there's an assumption there that I had been part of those discussions or part of that decision, and so therefore I would be able to illuminate you on that. But the reality is that I also think there's a difference between when a decision was made and when a decision was communicated to me, which may be different things. And so, sorry, just to circle back to the question, which I kind of have actually forgotten what it was.
Well, that's okay. Let me try it a different way. You told us that, as far as you were aware, before the test was done, the idea would be to be open about the presence of the additional material, because maybe you could get a field of application report which would allow that very unusual and unrepresentative makeup to be used in practice. You get the results of the test. What was it about the results of the test that meant that Celetex changed its mind and thereafter decided to conceal the presence of the additional material?
The answer to that question briefly is I don't know.
Right. Did you ever seek to find out, given what you told us about your belief that there would be openness and candour about the presence of the additional material before the test?
No.
Why is that?
I don't know. I think I was unhappy with what I've been told, and I didn't feel that anybody would want to perhaps have that discussion with me.
Did you even seek to try?
No, I think I had a clear impression of what was going to occur and what they wanted to do.
Is it really right that before the test you really thought that Celetex were going to be open and honest about the presence of the additional material?
Yes, that is correct.
The other question I wanted to revisit with you, or visit with you, was the rationale for the presence of the magnesium oxide layer. And you say that it was to reinforce the cladding, at the back of the cladding, where it met the fire barriers. We had taken from other evidence that it was, in a sense, to protect the thermocouples at level 2 and at the top of the rig from getting too hot. Is that part of the thinking, or was that part of the thinking, or was it simply to do with reinforcing the cladding panels so that they stayed intact?
Well, I think those things are related, because as the fire travels up, you then trigger the failure conditions of the test, which is to say the thermocouple raising temperature. And so by having a effective fire barrier design, you are increasing the, I guess, performance of the rig, and that helps you to achieve that success, and that success is based around the thermocouples.
Right. Putting it slightly shortly, or let me ask it openly and shortly, why did you decide to apply the additional 6 millimetres magnesium oxide at the level 2 thermocouples and at the top of the rig, as opposed to anywhere else on the rig?
I think it would have been related to the position of the level 2 thermocouples, right. And I also think it would have been related to flames going off the top of the rig as well.
And how would the presence of the magnesium oxide prevent the flames coming up from the top of the rig?
It would be exactly the same reason, because I think the flames coming out the top of the rig, they would be coming out of that gap. And so if you have a cavity barrier which addresses that gap, then that will not happen.
I want to turn to product literature.
I'm sorry, Mr. Millard, I'd like to follow up on your question.
Right.
Do you know who actually decided in where the magnesium oxide boards would be placed? Because there's no drawing for anyone to follow, is there?
No, there isn't. And
You know who took that decision?
No, I don't. It's a short answer. It may be that it came out of as a consensus, or perhaps it is just that is logically where they would need to be positioned.
Well, if you think about it, some magnesium oxide boards were delivered to the BRE's Burn Hall, or wherever they store them. Patch Jones, I think, was the person who actually built the rig, is that right?
I'm not sure who actually constructed the second rig. I think that might be correct from evidence.
Well, someone did anyway.
Yeah, sure.
Whoever was in charge of constructing the rig must have had either given free hand to decide what to do with these boards, which on the face of it didn't have any place on the rig, or was told, either what to do with them or where to put them.
Well, I
And
think...
who told whom what to do with them,
Okay, so I don't...
if you know.
Well, the first thing is you're correct. There's no way that the person building it, which is to say Patch Jones, would have decided where they were going to go. Right. So he would have received a clear instruction from Celetex to do that. I think in terms of who told him, I think that would have been John, because John was at the rig directing it, and some of that memory or some of that understanding is not contemporaneous, but I have seen John's statement. But equally, I don't think that John would have been there on the day going, where are we going to put this? I think they've got to go there. I'm sure that it would have been decided before then where they're going to go in a general sense. Okay, this line needs to go here, which is below the second of the thermocouples, and yes, we've got one at the top as well.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah, just following up on what you told the chairman, is what you told the chairman something that John Roper told you, or are you just trying to piece together the piece?
Honestly, I think I took that from John's evidence, where he describes, actually, I believe,
right,
that he was there and telling him what to do.
I see. So you can't add, by reference to your own recollection of the events at the time, to what John Roper has already told the inquiry?
No.
Right, I see. Can I then turn to product literature? Overall question, did you have any input into the drafting of the product literature for Celetex RS5000 when it was launched in August 2014?
Yes, I did.
Let's see how we go. Can you tell us in general terms which parts of that product literature you drafted?
I was asked to make contributions to a document which was called the Rain Screen Cladding Specification Guide.
Right. Anything else? Any other document, like the data sheet or the compliance guide? I
was asked to contribute a blog which was to be placed on the Celetex website. That is the only recollection that I have, both then and now, of my contribution to the literature. I was shown an email, and that email references me, although I'm not included in it, and it says, I think it's an email to Tina Smith, and it says, Jamie, can you please go to Jamie and get 3 to 6 bullet points about the installation of RS5000 for the rain screen cladding application sheet, which is different from the data sheet, but I've got no memory and there's no evidence to say that she ever did that.
Right, okay, can I just then pick you up on the specification guide? CEL 6013, please. This is the specification guide, and if we look at the third page, please, page 3, we can see the introduction to that document. Did you draft any of that?
Yes, I did a draft of some of that and sent it to Lizzie Seaton, and I think that draft was then used to come up with this final version.
Right, and I have a document to show you, but perhaps we can take it more quickly. First 3 paragraphs of that page and the first 2 sentences of the 4th paragraph, I think, from the record, are what you drafted. Is that right?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. So there is an email which basically says exactly what I said to Lizzie, and so that can be referred to. But if you are telling me that matches the first 3 paragraphs and the first sentence, then I'm prepared to accept that.
Well, I think we can. Let me just do it very quickly, if I can. CEL 409596, please. This is an email chain between you, Jonathan Roper, Lizzie Seaton, and Rob Warren relating to the rain screen cladding literature. Page 3, you say, on page 3, you send an email saying, please find attached design considerations. You see that?
Yep.
And what's attached, I think, is a draft. That's at CEL 409590, please. And can we go to page 4 in that document? And the introduction. If you look at the bottom of the 4th page, it says buildings with a story height greater than 18 metres have additional requirements under the National Building Regulations. Please see our separate compliance guide or contact the Celetex Technical Centre for assistance. Did you draft that?
Yes, I did.
Yes, and that refers to the compliance guide.
Yes.
And then you go to CEL 409579. This is an email of the 3rd of June 2014 where you emailed Mr. Roper and Mr. Warren with some draft wording for an introduction. See that, and there is underneath it in italics a block of text. Can you see that?
Yes, I do.
And just cast your eye down that. I'm not going to spend time reading it all to you. But if you go back to the specification guide, perhaps we can keep that on the screen and look at the specification guide at CEL 6013. Just this confirms your evidence, I think, that the first 3 paragraphs and the first 2 paragraphs of the 4th paragraph of the introduction are the same. Page 3 of the rain screen. Yes, there it is. Just casting your eye back and forth, you can see that you were the one, I think, who had put that into your 3rd of June email, and it found its way into the introduction.
Okay. Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
Now, you can see that in the right-hand side, on the right-hand side of the page, you can see that, you can see on the left-hand side of the page that your email stops where it says Celetex RS5000 is uniquely positioned to help meet these goals. Celetex RS5000 is a premium PIR solution. And then it stops at that point, ... But if you cast your eye to the right-hand side, someone has added the words, for use in rain screen applications and suitable for use in buildings above 18 metres in height. Do you know who put that wording in to the final version of the specification guide in that paragraph? Because it doesn't appear in your email.
No, I don't.
Did you know where it came from? Do you know, or did you know at the time where it came from?
I know it's consistent with how Celetex wanted to market the product. I didn't know where those words had come from. I think I know now from other people's evidence that they were taken from a Kingspan document.
Right. At the time, did you see the specification guide, and particularly those words there, which follow on immediately from the words that you had drafted?
Yes, I would have seen this document after it had been produced.
Yeah. Did you think at the time that those words were, well, let me put it to you, that those words are, on the page, thoroughly misleading, aren't they? Because they suggest that RS5000 can be used in any building above 18 metres, regardless of whether the construction of the cladding system on such buildings is the same as that which had passed the test.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Did the fact that those were thoroughly misleading words occur to you at the time?
Yes, I think it would have done.
Yes. So can we again cut a long story short by saying that at least in this respect you knew that Celetex was marketing RS5000 on the basis of a thoroughly misleading statement about its potential for use in buildings over 18 metres?
Yes.
I think you said you'd have nothing to do with the compliance guide, is that right?
That is
Drafting
correct.
the compliance guide. Now, the launch presentation happened in early August 2014. Can we go to CEL 401228, please? This is an email to you and Rob Warren from Jonathan Roper on that day, which attaches a draft of the CTC presentation for the 4th of August, with some slides and some FAQs at the end. Do you remember receiving this document?
I'm not sure if I remember receiving it. If I remember receiving it at the time, but I've seen this document and also the coming presentation.
Did you understand the purpose of this document to be to make sure that you and your fellow TSOs who would handle technical queries as they might come in relation to RS5000 would know all about it and be able to answer questions about it in advance of or perhaps shortly after the launch?
Yes, I do.
Did that presentation go ahead, do you know?
Yes, it did.
Were you there?
Yes, I was.
Yes. Do you know who delivered it?
It was delivered primarily by John Roper,
Right.
but there was but Rob Warren delivered a section at the end.
Right. Can we look at CEL 401229, please? This is the CTC launch presentation of the 4th of August 2014. As you can see, is that the same set of slides as you saw?
I'm not sure, because I know from looking at other evidence that there was also a similar document for the sales launch, and I think that they are different in some respects. So I think if that date is correct, 040814, to the email we've just saw, where it, well, I'm not sure if it did say that, did it?
No, I'm just wondering whether this is the same set of documents that you saw, or whether there was a difference. But let's see how we go. Can we go to slide 18?
Yeah. Okay.
Here is a list of products, 5 of them in all, which are described as the latest addition to our 5000 range.
Yeah.
Was that in the slide pack that you'd seen?
I believe so, yes.
Right. Now, it describes RS5000 as the latest addition to our 5000 range. In fact, as I think you told us earlier, it wasn't. It was essentially FR5000 rebranded, wasn't it?
That's correct.
So on the face of this slide, this was a false and misleading statement to your own sales team, wasn't it? To the extent that it described Celetex RS5000 as a latest edition. It was already in the range.
Yes, in that sense, that's correct, yeah.
Yes. Was that fact well understood within the CTC, namely the fact that actually Celetex RS5000 was not remotely a latest edition? It was simply Celetex FR5000 got up with a new number.
I think it was I think that people came later to understand that. I think it was a kind of an open secret, because our understanding is that although we knew that to be the case, and it was discussed amongst the technical team, and the people within the technical team knew that it was the same product physically, it was an instruction that was not to be revealed to customers.
Now, Jonathan Room in the sales team told us, and this is the gist of his evidence, is that he wasn't aware that RS5000 wasn't a new product. Was there a plan within Celetex to conceal that fact from the sales team?
I don't know.
Well, you can help us, I think. Do you know of whether or not there was a plan within Celetex to conceal the fact that RS5000 was in fact FR5000 rebranded from the sales team?
I'm not sure to what extent they did understand that. It's obviously presented here on this slide as being a new product. My recollection is it was a kind of an open secret, and that most people at Celetex knew that they were the same product.
Why would you have an open secret? What was the purpose of that?
I think it was to be not revealed to customers.
Right.
Example of that would be, let's say that somebody's ordered by accident FR5000, and they've got it on their building site waiting to go into their building. I mean, put aside the fact of whether it was or wasn't suitable to be done so, and they rang up and said, oh, we've ordered the wrong thing. We've got FR5000 instead of RS5000. I believe that they would have been told, no, you have got the wrong thing. You'll need to send it back and get the right thing, even though in reality it's the same product.
Well, that is an odd idea, I have to confess. Why not just get the sales team or your people to say, well, don't worry, FR5000 has now passed an 8414 test and you can use it, subject, of course, to the numerous caveats that we see in the marketing literature and other things.
they obviously did not want that to be the case.
But I have to suggest to you, that was because they wanted to drive sales of RS5000 as if it were a new product, when it wasn't.
That may, yeah, I would say that is correct.
Well, I'm putting that to you. Is that the case? Is that the
believe
fact?
so, yes.
Right. Slide 39 then, please. Compliance guide. And it says in the third bullet point there, reference point for above 18-metre inquiries and should be attached to every U-value calculator email sent. At the top of that, it says guide to complying with ADB2 for buildings above 18 metres in height. Details the tested system. When it says details the tested system, that was actually untrue, wasn't it?
That's correct.
And when it says reference point for above 18-metre inquiries, that was encouraging sales colleagues, or perhaps CTC colleagues, to rely on a slide that all of you knew, you, John Roper, and Paul Evans, is this right, knew to be misleading.
That's correct.
And it's misleading because it didn't detail the system as tested.
That's correct.
Similarly, slide 40. Do you have a solution for buildings above 18 metres in height? Answer, yes. Celetex RS5000 has successfully met the performance criteria in BR 135 and therefore is acceptable for use in buildings above 18 metres in height. Again, that was a thoroughly misleading and dishonest statement because everybody at Celetex knew that the fact that it had passed that test didn't make it acceptable for use in all buildings over that height.
Yes, I would agree.
Now, we see your comments coming back on these at CEL 3010362. And you say, hi, John, looks brilliant, and you give comments on lots of slides here. Now, allowing for any differences in the slides that we've shown you, you don't raise the concerns relating to slide 18, slide 39, and slide 40 that I've shown you. You don't say those are misleading, you can't possibly put those out, do you?
No, I don't.
Why is that?
It's because a decision has already been made and communicated to me that this is the way that Celetex is intending to market that material. And as I said previously, all of the work that happens after that is on that basis. And so I'm proceeding on the basis that that decision has been made and limiting my feedback to other areas.
Now, you see in the middle of that email, under slide 23, you ask a question. Are we going to push RS5000 for masonry outer leaf as well? What is our position on masonry outer leaf and 18 metres? Is the reality that you knew that the only position that you could hold, or that CTC people taking calls could hold, was that masonry outer leaf was outside the scope of the system as tested, because the system had been tested under Part 2 and not Part 1 of BS 8414?
That is correct. I think there was a feeling that due to the nature of masonry, as in that it's not really a rain screen cladding, that it could not be anything other than robust, because to break into the cavity, fire would have to go through bricks, which it would never do. Now, I would agree with you now that looking back on that, that is an erroneous thought, because it's not. It wasn't for us to actually form that opinion. But nevertheless, that was the basis for that comment.
Can I just ask you one or two questions about the actual marketing of RS5000 from your perspective? Can we go to your statement, please, at page 26 and look at paragraph 81? Now, you say there that in the fourth line down, we then started taking customer inquiries on RS5000 after launch in autumn 2014. Potential customers contacted the technical team to ask if they could use our product in above 18-metre projects. And I would say potentially they could, but they should consider their decision in conjunction with a document which detailed the test, this being the Celetex compliance guide. And then you go on in the next paragraph, 82, to say we were strict with customers and were careful to say that those inquiring about buildings above 18 metres, that they should not use our product unless they were using it in accordance with the compliance guide. And at paragraph 43 you say, you go on to say, in the second line, I was thorough in informing customers that RS 5000 should be used in accordance with this design. I tried to do the best that I could, as far as I could. Now, the problem is, isn't it, is that the compliance guide didn't in fact show the design which was actually tested, did it? Because it concealed the presence of the additional material.
That's correct.
And ditto, nor did the BS 8414 report.
That's correct.
And so therefore, when you say you were strict with customers and referred them to the compliance guide, you were referring customers to a compliance guide that you knew was dishonest and misleading.
That's correct.
So in reality, you were a part, weren't you, of perpetrating, continuing to perpetrate the fraud on the market.
Yes, that is correct. Although, no, that's fine.
But no, do you want to add anything?
Yes, so first of all, the way of dealing with customer inquiries was an explicit work instruction from Celetex senior management to our department. I did not make a decision or have any part in a decision or authority to make a decision to conceal the additional material. I had a belief in my heart that if somebody were to follow the guidance in the compliance guide, even though it was misleading, that it would be based upon a design that would have passed if it was tested that way. I didn't have any control over how Celetex had chosen to go down that route, although I absolutely accept that I knew about it and didn't do what was right in raising it. And what was under my control was, and you may feel this is entirely insufficient, but it was to at least diligently ensure that people did receive the compliance guide. But that having been said, and with that context, I completely agree with your question that I was indeed referring people to a document which was fundamentally incorrect.
You say in that last answer that you had a belief in your heart that if somebody were to follow the guidance, it would be based on a design that would pass. I have to suggest to you, Mr. Hayes, that you had no basis at all in thinking that the design, as described in the compliance guide and the specification guide, would have passed, namely without the additional material.
I think there is some basis for that, and I'm not trying to retroactively make excuses for behaviour which wasn't correct, but I think it is fair to say that there was a basis for that, and the basis of that was the conversation with Phil Clark. And again, I don't want to come across as trying to excuse behaviour which wasn't correct, but I think it's fair and relevant to raise the fact that that design was tested after Grenfell and in fact did pass.
But that wasn't known to you at the time.
No, I accept that completely.
Right. And the conversation you refer to with Phil Clark was really pure speculation as between the two of you, because there had been no such test.
Yes, I also accept that, but I think that Phil would have had a level of experience and expertise so that his opinion, if you like, and it was only an opinion, but it would have carried some weight with me.
I just want to look at one example of you giving advice. Can we look at CEL 401397, please? This is an email chain in early March 2013, Mr. Hayes, between Simcoe and Celetex Technical in relation to a Boma and Kirkland project at ONB, which I think stands for One New Bailey. Do you remember that? We can look at it. And if we go to CEL 401397 at the bottom of page 2 and over to page 3, we can see that Mr. Ross, Eric Ross of Simcoe, sends an email to Celetex Technical about U values, saying that they've quoted for RS insulation on the above project 1 New Bailey, Salford, ONB. And if you go to the page 3, he goes on, the main contractor has some concerns regarding BBA certification, which you answered in the attached email. However, they've since come back again with the below comments, and the comments are set out below. That refers back to you. Would this email have come, or email chain have come through to anyone in the technical team other than you, or would it have come to you specifically, do you think?
I'm really not sure. Does it not say on the...
No, it doesn't. If we go back to page 2, we can see that it comes to the technical team. Bottom of page 2, Eric Ross to Celetex Technical. We can see that you answer him at the next email up at page 2. You say, thank you for your email, 4th of March. Do you see that?
Yes, can I...
It's from Celetex Technical, but it goes out in your name.
Sure.
So I think would it have come to you directly, or would it have come through someone else to you?
It would have come, by the looks of it, to the technical address, which is an open inbox, which is
I see.
Available for the team to see.
Right. And then I think we can see the response to this, or an email chain relating to it. It's CEL 401397. If we go to page 5, please, bottom of page 5 and over onto page 6, we can see that there'd been an earlier discussion relating to RS 5000, and there's a halfway down that email, you can see it says, please find below an attached response from Celetex regarding the BBA issue. I hope this is sufficient. And then it's set out, as stated in approved document B2ADB. Did you write that response, do you think?
No, I don't believe so. But I mean, I'm now looking at this document, possibly for the first time, and I don't have a memory of writing that.
Right. If it wasn't you, who else might it have been in your technical department?
Has it come from the technical department, or has it come from somebody else at Celetex, or...?
Well, let me see if I can do this 2 slightly different ways. It's a very complex email string to run around.
I have to say, yes.
But if we go to page 2, we can see that you send an email to Eric Ross, as I showed you before, on the 4th of March 2015, and you say, thank you for your email. I'm happy that the statement we made previously is suitable and correct. Celetex RS 5000 has been successfully tested to BS 8414 Part 2, so it can be considered for use in buildings above 18 metres. I could probably take the question just on that. That wasn't correct, was it?
No.
In fact, it was false and misleading to say that it would be considered for use on buildings above 18 metres merely by reason of the fact that it had passed that test.
I would agree with you.
Yes.
Yes, although it is the Celetex determined response to queries regarding RS 5000.
Right. So that was the party line, as it were, that you were pumping out.
Yes.
Yes. And just to finish off the point, then, if we could then get back to the email on page 5.
Would you just like to comment on the next paragraph?
Right.
Again, that is our position, is that we are open about the system. So again, that is part of the Celetex position, which is that inquiries will be dealt with by providing a U-value calculation.
But that was sorry, I'm so sorry. That was false, though, wasn't it? Your position was that you were very far from open about the system that you tested, because the system that you tested included the additional material about which you were very far from open.
I would agree with that.
So
yes.
Again, that's a false and misleading statement that you yourself were giving Eric Ross. Yes.
Yes.
And if we then go to page 5, there's a longer version of the response, which I think you were picking up in this email, halfway down the email that Eric Roth sends to Simon Martin, under the words I showed you. And there we can see 3 paragraphs on that page, the first of which ends with the words, and therefore complies with the requirements of ADB for buildings that exceed 18 metres in height. Again, you agree, I think, false and misleading, yes?
Yes.
Yes. And then on the next page, page 6, you say Celetex RX 5000 has also achieved local authority building control, LABC approval, for use in rain screen cladding systems. Please find this attached confirming that the product is suitable for use in masonry and steel frame constructions, has achieved the performance criteria set out in BR 135 and has a thermal conductivity of 21. Did you send him the LABC certificate that was issued by the LABC at the end of August, do you think?
I think I'm getting a little bit confused because wasn't the question, had I written that? And that doesn't seem...
Right. It certainly seems to have come from Celetex, from the technical department. Is that wrong?
It may well be wrong, yes. Perhaps that has come from a different place within Celetex. And in fact, some of those words look familiar because I think there is something in evidence where perhaps John Roper has produced isn't there in his evidence, there's an email where he gives a standard set of words to be used when dealing with inquiries, and that seems similar to this.
Right.
So perhaps it's come from a salesperson, for example. So if the question is, do I remember writing that set of words, then the answer is no, I don't. But if he says that has come from Celetex, then there must be another email which Celetex can provide from their servers, which would tell you exactly who indeed has said that and where it's come from.
The only reason I ask is if we go back to the second page of this email run, as I showed you, the first paragraph says that you said, I happy that the statement we made previously is suitable and correct.
Yes.
Without getting hung up on whether it was you personally or Mr. Roper or another department, you are certainly standing by the statement as we see set out at length. You accept that?
Yes, I do.
And therefore you were repeating the false and misleading statements contained earlier on?
Yes.
Yes. And you referred in that last paragraph, as I showed you on page 6, to the LABC certificate. Was that a reference to the LABC certificate that had been issued at the end of August 2014?
Yes, I think to be fair, there's every possibility that somebody has come in with this inquiry and I've been in a position where I've had to affirm the Celetex line, if you like, which is to say, yes, you can consider the product. Here's a copy of the compliance guide, but without a specific memory of it, I'm not able to say that I looked at every one of those paragraphs and said, okay, yeah, I'm affirming that. It may well have been that I had no choice but to say, yes, we stand by it, because for me to take any other action would be to say, no, that's not correct, which was not the position of Celetex to say that.
Can I then turn to January 2015 and Grenfell itself? CEL 50453, please. Now, this is an email, if we go halfway down that page, from Jonathan Room to you on the 19th of January 2015. And if you go over the page, you can see that it forwards to you an email that Jonathan Room has received from Daniel Anketell-Jones at Harley. Now, you may not have known this at the time, that Daniel Anketell-Jones was the designer on the Grenfell Tower project. This email isn't about the Grenfell Tower project, at least not on its face. And it says, "Good morning, John. Sorry, but got a headache for you. We are being asked by one of our clients to see the test results and certificates for the RS 5000 insulation. They want to know exactly how it was installed when tested to BS 84142/2005, who carried out the testing, how it was fixed, what it was covered with, what cladding was used, what support structure, etc., and most importantly, the results. Drawing or photos of the test setup would help show how it was installed, but I imagine these form part of the test results anyway. They also want to see the certificate and results for the test to BS 476 Part 7 fire class rating showing the index rating achieved during the test. Could you sort this out for us, please? We're hoping to put this forward on most of the cladding jobs, so having this information to hand would be most useful. And that comes to you from Jonathan Room. He says, if you go to the bottom of page 1, thank you. Hi, Jamie. Do we have the test results for RS 5000 for the BS 476 Part 7 fire class rating, as Dan mentions below? I can always go and visit Dan to discuss the BS 8414 Part 2 test results in person. And then you respond to him and say, hi, Jonathan, I'm afraid I do not have access to that document. I imagine that this will be a controlled document and only available through marketing. I'm not sure if there would be a requirement for a non-disclosure agreement, etc. Please speak to Debs in the first instance, and if necessary, she will have a chat with Paul. Now, first of all, when you saw the email from Daniel Anketell-Jones that Jonathan Room emailed to you, and he says, I've got a headache for you, was that the kind of requests for details that you were beginning to receive or had been receiving since the launch of RS 5000 in August?
That seems to be very detailed in terms of how he's laid things out and the things that he's asked for. But we were receiving inquiries. I can't think of any ones in specifically, but I think that we would have received inquiries about the use of the product above 18 metres, and it's possible that some of those inquiries would have asked for things such as test data.
Right. Now, you say that you didn't have access to that document. Why didn't you have access to the full 33-page BRE test report?
I don't think that Jonathan Room is asking me for that document. I think he's asking me for the BS 476 Part 7 document.
Right.
And that document is to do with the surface spread of flame testing and not to do with the above 18 metre test.
I see. So you did have access to the BS 8414 full test report, but you're saying not the BS 476 Part 7 test. Is that right?
The Celetex Technical Centre did not have access to either of those test reports. I believe that I personally had a copy of the 32-page test report because Debbie had sent it to me on a previous occasion. But the team or the department would not have access to either of those documents. And in respect to his specific request, which is 476 Part 7, I did not have and would not be expected to have access to that document.
Right. Now, Mr. Room told us that his experience was that members of the SAIL team didn't have access to test reports. Did that apply to you as a member of the technical team?
Yes, that's correct.
Given your role in the test and in seeing the draft test reports for RS 5000, that wasn't correct, was it? That you did at least have access to those documents?
I personally had a copy of the 32-page test report for the 8414 test. That was because of, I guess, my being on the project and my relationship with Debbie. The department as an entity were not to have a copy of that test report, and the department and me personally would not have had any other test reports relevant to Celetex products. I'm sorry if that's not clear. I've tried to be clear.
Did you know of a general requirement, if that's the right word, in Approved Document B, in at least two places, that designers, when considering external wall constructions, should carefully check the test reports to ensure the compliance of products with the test results? Now, I'm paraphrasing Approved Document B, perhaps unsurprisingly.
No.
Were you aware of that?
Yes, I was.
How did you think designers would be able to go about complying with that guidance if Celetex in relation to a Celetex product were simply going to refuse access to those test reports on the grounds that they were controlled?
I don't think that they would be able to.
Did it occur to you at the time that by pursuing a policy of not allowing designers to see test reports and check the data in it, you were disabling them from complying with the requirements under ADB?
I don't think I thought about it in those terms, but I did realise that it was ridiculous, really, that they would not have that access to that document.
Right. Did you take that view up with anybody within Celetex and try to encourage people to be a little bit more open so that designers could actually test these?
I think it comes
products
down to exactly the issue with the missing material. They had well, first of all, there was a deliberate misleading in terms of the tested system, but I also believe that they did not want to encourage people to ask questions about the specific details of the test.
Right. Well, Mr. Hayes, thank you very much for your own evidence generally. I've come to the end of my questions. Mr. Chairman, is this a convenient moment?
Yes, I think it is.
Sorry it's taken a little bit longer.
No, that's all right. Mr. Hayes, although Council says he's come to the end of his questions, we always have a break at this point. First of all, to let him just check that there's nothing he hasn't covered, but also so that we can consider questions from others who are not here but who are following the proceedings. So we'll have a 10-minute break, is that enough?
Let me just... yes, Mr. Chairman, I think that would...
Well, we'll say 10 minutes unless
suffice.
you tell us you need more later on.
Very good, thank you very much.
We'll stop for 10 minutes, hope it won't be any longer, and then you come back and we'll see if there are further questions.
Thank you.
All right? So 20 to 5, and no talking to anyone about your evidence when
Yes,
you're
sir.
out. All
Thank
right?
you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Millett, if it turns out that more time is required, you can let us know.
Yes, thank you.
20 to 5 otherwise, thank you. Yes, would you ask Mr. Hayes to come back in, please? Right, Mr. Hayes, we'll see if Mr. Millett's found some more questions for you. Yes, Mr. Millett?
Mr. Hayes, I want us to ask you one or two questions about Mr. Warren's involvement. Did you discuss the presence of the magnesium oxide and the other additional material with him before the test, the second test?
Yes.
Did Mr. Warren know exactly what was going into the second test, to the best of your recollection?
I think I stated earlier and in my first statement that I discussed it as an idea with Rob, and that I had a specific recollection of talking about it as an idea with Rob. I don't recall a specific conversation with Rob after the test about its presence. So that's the answer.
Right. And following up on that, from what you know, from what you saw, heard from other people, or heard particularly from Mr. Warren, did you know that, or think that Mr. Warren had known about the decision following the second test to conceal the use of the, or presence of, the additional materials?
It's not an easy question to answer. I think it's fair to tell the inquirer that I have a relationship with Rob. I've worked with Rob for many years. Worked with him after Celetex. Stayed in touch with him. Rob is a person that I like and have respect for. At the time of my first statement, I wasn't sure whether Rob was aware of that material. I think, looking back at it, the fact that Rob, I'd had a discussion with Rob about the idea to use it, and just things that I've now seen to show that it was being discussed at senior management level. The answer is I'm not sure. The balance of probability is that that's it.
Right. Okay. Can I just ask you one or two other questions about the RS5000 test data sheet? CEL 50411, please. And you can see on this page, I know you had no input into this document, as you, I think, told us, but presumably you saw this
Yes.
in and after August 2014 because of your role in the Technical Services Department. You can see that it says it's been tested to Class 0. Do you know when those Class 0 tests were? The tests of BS 476 Part 6 and 476 Part 7. Do you know when those were?
No, I don't. And testing to Class 0 would not have been something that I had ever been involved with.
Did you know that the statement, in fact, was relying on tests under those British standards which had been done in 2011?
I think that I have been made aware of that after the fact, that I have become aware of that. I don't believe that.
Did you know at the time that there had been a change in the chemical makeup of RS or FR 5000 in and from August 2012 on the Hipchen line, where the polyol used was different? Did you know about that?
No, I had no knowledge of that at all.
Right.
That's something I have since become aware of from viewing evidence which was made available to me as a core participant.
Right. So would it follow that you didn't know that there was no further testing under BS 476 Part 6 or 476 Part 7 on the new composition of the then FR, later RS 5000, after the addition of the polyol on the Hipchen line?
No, I did not know that at all.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I don't think I've got any further questions.
Right.
So, Mr. Hayes, it remains for me to thank you very much for coming to the inquiry and answering my questions. I'm extremely grateful to you. So thank you.
And Mr. Hayes is right that I should thank you on behalf of the panel for coming here to give us your evidence. It has been extremely useful to hear from you, and we're very grateful to you for coming and telling us all that you've known about these matters. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much indeed.
And now you're free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Millett, that must be the end for today.
It is the end for today, I'm glad to say. And
It's
at
been a
10 to
long
5
day,
it jolly
but,
well should be, I suppose.
I'm glad we were
yes.
able to finish with Hayes' evidence.
Yes, now, we had got Debbie Berger scheduled to come today to give evidence. As I said yesterday, self-evidently she won't be coming today. We are still organising her for the end of next week. And at the moment, provisionally, she is to come to give evidence next Thursday morning.
Right, thank you. So we will
update core participants to finalise that as soon as we can.
Thank you very much. Well, that's as far as we can go for today. We now break off until Monday of next week at 10 o'clock when we'll begin to take evidence from another witness. So 10 o'clock on Monday, please. Thank you very much.